Welcome to another episode of the GunBlog VarietyCast with your hosts, Sean Sorrentino and Aaron Paulette.
Welcome to episode 148 of GunBlog VarietyCast Radio, a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. How are you doing, Crossbone? Aaron?
You know, it seems to me that our country is just hell-bent on Civil War II, war harder. And I really don't want that to happen. But wow, it seems like people are just really wanting the chance to kill each other. In addition to this week being the 1-year anniversary of the Pulse terrorist massacre, so it's already somber, we had, was it 2 or was it 3 active shooter incidents this week? There was the nut in Arlington, Virginia. There was the U.S. Postal Service shooter in San Francisco, and was there a third that I'm missing?
I think that was UPS, not U.S. Postal Service. I think it was at a UPS place, but I get your point. I don't know. None of them technically qualify as a mass shooter under FBI rules because one didn't kill anybody and the other one managed to kill 3 plus himself, so that's doesn't really count.
Okay, the shooting is bad enough, but then there's the fact that, and this was before the San Francisco shooter happened, or at least that I knew about. But I heard about Steve Scalise getting shot, and I knew what was going to happen. And so just to get ahead of things, I posted on Facebook, and I don't know, maybe I thought I was helping, maybe I was just stirring the pot, I don't know. But I said, and I do sincerely believe this, I said, quote, saying Steve Scalise deserved to be shot because he's a Republican is morally equivalent to blaming a rape victim for how she dressed. End quote. And I do firmly believe this. And, wouldn't you know it, the victim blaming started. So I was vindicated in this. But what got me was one loathsome, reprehensible, ambulatory feces who commented on that post. And I'm not going to name him, but I'm just going to read what he said. And he says, "No, this analogy doesn't hold water. I'm not saying he deserves to be shot, but he deserves to be blamed for his actions, unlike the rape victim, who obviously wasn't hurting anyone. This is more like a potential rape victim shooting a rapist." And see, that already pegged my blood pressure, but I know I have a tendency to overreact and fly off the handle. So when these things happen, I take a deep breath and I ask them. I make sure that they said what I thought they said. And I replied in this case,
"Hold on, let me see if I heard what I think I heard, because what I think I heard is making my blood boil and I'm ready to stab you to death. So maybe let's clarify," right? That's what you told him.
Essentially, what I said was, just so I'm 100% clear, who is the rapist in your scenario? And he answered, "The victim would be the American citizen who finds themselves without health care, Social Security, etc. This would be caused by the victimizer, legislators." And then he continues, "But again, the shooter is no more justified in this than would be a potential rape victim shooting a rapist. In this civilized society, we have rules and the means to change them without resorting to violence or taking the law into our own hands." The first thing, what this guy said was, well, Scalise maybe didn't necessarily deserve to be shot, but he was asking for it. And I lost nearly all of my patience with this guy when he said that the actual shooting victim was equivalent to the rapist and that the dead the dead would-be murderer was the potential rape victim. But I gave him that chance because I wanted to make sure, and then he doubled down with saying that potential rape victims in general are not justified in shooting their rapists, and that's when I just fucking lost it.
In the days before Facebook, we could assume that the people around us pretty much thought what we thought, right? They can't be that stupid because they're still breathing without instructions, right? That is the real problem with social media. That's the negative side of social media, is we get to find out how stupid some people really are. and it's really hard to take. Now, today, I did see something that was really funny. Jenna Jameson, if you know who Jenna Jameson is, then you know. If you don't know who Jenna Jameson is, I'm not going to tell you. But Jenna Jameson was going after people on Twitter who were saying things like, this is the result of Republican hate speech or something like that. And she's like, the shooter was a Bernie bro, you insufferable twit. Jenna Jameson. She burned some famous actor or other. This guy was mad about another actor saying something pro-gun, right? So naturally, he had to be stomped on. And Jenna Jameson burned him. I was like, oh my goodness. There's some good things that come out of it. You learn some interesting things about people. And sometimes you learn some interesting things about people that you thought you knew all there was to know about. You'd seen them in all kinds of, not me personally. No, not me personally. I would never have seen it. But, you get the picture. You think you knew them well. You had seen them in all sort of different positions. And suddenly they just come out of left field and what? Oh my goodness. Jenna Jameson likes guns. Okay, cool. Good to know. Well, at least I got you smiling again, Aaron. I can hear that you're a little happier.
Well, she's certainly been shot at enough times.
So, Aaron, with all of the bad things going on in the world, we need something to raise our spirits. So let me tell you the story about a bank robber and a judge who lives by the motto, let the punishment fit the crime. You ready for this?
My body is ready, Sean.
Dateline, Kansas City, Kansas. A 70-year-old man who said he robbed a Kansas City, Kansas bank so he could get away from his wife blamed his actions on depression. A federal judge sentenced Lawrence John Ripple on Tuesday. Now, normally I redact the names, but in this case, this is a famous case. Everybody knows who we're talking about. It's been all over social media, so nobody cares. And he's also not going to Google me and come to my house and come after me for putting his name out, so we can leave it alone. Ripple went to the Bank of Labor, a block from police headquarters, last September. He gave a note to a teller saying he had a gun and was demanding money. After he was given it, Ripple waited for police. Court records indicate Ripple wrote the robbery note in front of his wife and told her he would rather be in jail than at home. The Kansas City Star reported that he was sentenced to 6 months home confinement and 3 years of supervised probation, which includes 50 hours of community service. He robbed the bank so he could go to jail to get away from his wife. And the judge says, oh no, home confinement. Let the punishment fit the crime.
I don't know whether to be impressed by the judge or just to shake my head at the sheer rat bastardry of it. Wow, that's harsh.
It is.
Fitting, but harsh.
So, last weekend I shot the IDPA match on Saturday, and it didn't go very well. I came in sort of in the middle of the pack instead of a little bit closer to the top end. The gun was great. The gun was fantastic. The problem was the loose nut behind the trigger. I dropped the P320 full size off at Carolina Ceramic Coatings. Bud at CCC is working on a geometric urban camo in purple, white, and black, and it's going to be cool. I'm looking forward to this. And Dices has one more class left in her, Intro to Agility class, and it's the final exam. She learned how to do pinwheel jumps yesterday. That is 3 jumps in a spiral. Well, I don't know. They're 3 jumps where one leg of the jump is almost touching the other leg. It's in a triangle shape. It's supposed to be kind of difficult, but Dices didn't think it was hard. I just told her to jump over him, and she jumped over him and came back and got her treat because she knew where the treat was. She just followed the treat. I talked to the wife about the name May May, which is the new dog, the Rottweiler, what her name is. In fact, she sent me a detailed email on how this name came about. Dices, when we first got her, was afraid of everything. And the wife, she didn't know what to call her. We didn't have a name for her, so she was just randomly calling her stuff. And she ended up kind of calling her Boober. Now, all you Fraggle Rock people out there know exactly what we're talking about here. Boober Fraggle was basically afraid of everything. He was, anything startled him, and that's where she got the name. She's continued to call Dices like Kissy Monster or Cuddle Monster, Monster this, Monster that, kind of Grover Elmo, that sort of monster. And so she started thinking, well, we should have a name that kind of goes with that. Elmo's mother's name is May. And so she just called her May because that's Elmo's mom. Elmo's mom is apparently gentle and kind and patient and that sort of thing. And so, whatever. That seems like it would work for that dog. So that's where we get the name, May. How exciting, right? Oh, well. I can't make it any more exciting than it is. But now everybody knows where the dog's name comes from. So we have Dices and May.
Thanks to Lucky Gunner and Remington for their support of GunBlog VarietyCast Radio. From Golden Saber to range rounds, get a full lineup of quality Remington ammo that ships fast at LuckyGunner.com.
Well, let's get on with the show.
Beth is on assignment and will return next week.
This podcast runs on your donations. Go to gunblogvarietycast.com and click on the donate or the subscribe button in the right sidebar. You can make a one-time donation of any amount or subscribe for as little as $2 a month. That doesn't sound like much, but we pay our server costs monthly. A little help from you is a big help to us.
Felons Behaving Badly. Gastonia grandmother tied up and robbed at gunpoint. Dateline, Gastonia, North Carolina. Gastonia police arrested a man who was accused of barging into a grandmother's house, tying her up at gunpoint, and then robbing her on Friday afternoon. The victim, Jackie Badger, told NBC Charlotte that she had her front door open that afternoon when suspect knocked on her door. She said he asked to borrow her cell phone because his car broke down. I knew it was probably bad, but I did it anyway, Badger said. After giving him her phone, she said he eventually asked to fill up his water bottle. She recalled going into the kitchen before he came in through the front door. He was standing at the door, and he pulled out a gun and zip ties, she said. He told me to get on the floor. He said he tied her up, took her car keys, and went to her car out front to try to start it up. Badger said she escaped the house hiding behind bushes in her backyard before running for help at a nearby bar. Suspect was arrested shortly thereafter and charged with breaking and entering, robbery with a dangerous weapon, and kidnapping. As of Monday afternoon, he remained in jail under a $90,000 bond.
Well, I am glad the grandmother didn't get hurt. I'm sure that was a very scary ordeal for her. So what kind of festering pustule ties up and robs a grandmother?
Suspect: carry concealed weapon, misdemeanor, class 2. Larceny, misdemeanor, class 1. 2 counts misdemeanor breaking and entering, misdemeanor, class 1. Possess schedule 6, misdemeanor, class 1. Possession of burglary tools, felon, class I. Felony breaking and entering, felon, class H. Larceny after breaking and entering, felon, class H. Receiving, possessing firearm, felon, class G. Robbery with a dangerous weapon attempted, felon, class D. And 2 counts of robbery with a dangerous weapon, felon, class D.
Oh, that kind of festering pustule.
WannaCry 2.0 is coming. Do you want to protect yourself? Barron is here to tell you how you can build a top-notch network firewall to shield your router and Wi-Fi from bad people who want to scramble your data in
Tech Tips, Tech Tips, Tech Tips.
You are damaging my calm.
Tech Tips with the Barron.
Hey, kids! So today is going to be completely off the cuff and is basically being done on request. You're going to be hearing this Sunday or next week. Today is Wednesday. Yesterday was Microsoft's Patch Tuesday. And I'm going to preface this that there was a major patch that came out. Odds are, if your computer's set to automatically update, you've already gotten this patch. But you might want to actually go and double check and make sure it actually got installed. And the last time I showed up, back from my, I guess we'll call it, extended sabbatical, I talked about WannaCry and the ransomware and what was going on with that. I mentioned in passing that odds are it's going to get bad, it's going to get worse, and things are going to become very, very ugly. Last month, a vulnerability came out, and it affects what's known as the Samba server, which is the Windows file sharing service for Linux. This is significant because basically it was the same exact type of vulnerability they found in WannaCry. It was a remote execution vulnerability, and it could be exploited to cause things to happen. I realize that a decent number of our listeners don't natively run Linux, but here's where you are affected. Most of our wireless routers run an embedded form of Linux. Many modern routers nowadays actually have USB ports and SATA ports so you can hook up external hard drives. If you have hard drives hooked up to your wireless router, disconnect them now. Tell them to flush their data to the device and disconnect them. Do not connect them anymore. Here's the problem. Most wireless routers will get updates for about a year, and then the vendor stops updating them. So if you're running OpenWRT, you're probably updating that yourself, and you don't even really need to be listening to this, but you need to be making sure that your software is kept up to date. If you're using the stock firmware, this is where things get dangerous. As we continue moving down this pipe, issues are going to be found in firmware, and the issues that are found are never going to be fixed. We're going to have vulnerabilities sitting out in software, and it's going to get exploited, and it's going to leave us all vulnerable. So when the massive issue came out yesterday involving Windows, which is basically going to lead to WannaCry 2.0, as many people are calling it, or it has the potential to lead to WannaCry 2.0, they've already found it being used in the wild. It is being actively exploited as we speak, and it's a very serious issue. What I've come to realize, and I have been guilty of this, I've been using just a standard off-the-shelf commercial router because it's been good enough. Note my use of past tense. It has been good enough. It's not that it is good enough. And that's where things are shifting. Because of the fact that vendors are not going to properly update and maintain their equipment, it's up to us to update and maintain the equipment. And while you can certainly go out and get OpenWRT and hack the router and do all of that, it still requires a decent amount of knowledge on the user's behalf. There is an alternative. It's one of those things I've actually been looking at deploying myself for a while. It is unbelievably powerful. However, it still requires a little bit of effort on the user's part. However, it is widely regarded as the best firewall out there. If you're going to invest effort in something, you might as well do it right. So I've been telling a lot of people lately to look at deploying a PFSense firewall. So PFSense is actually a commercial product, but they've openly released it so you can actually go and deploy it yourself. The significance here is that you could go and buy a $200 very bare bones computer, put PFSense on a USB thumb drive, stick it in there, and boot it up, and you now have a dedicated firewall whose sole purpose is to do all of the things that's necessary to protect your network. Going one step further, though, since it's an actively engaged commercial product based off of a standard PC platform, it is getting updates on a regular basis, and because it is so highly and well regarded, it is very, very much under active development. This is important for everyone because when things go sideways, you need to know that you can turn around and get an update to fix the problem. The additional benefit is that PFSense Firewall is stripped down and is basically providing the bare necessities of what you need your firewall to do. It's not providing a Samba server so that you can share Windows files across your network. That's a wonderful feature. It's very, very handy, especially for when you're wanting to share files with your family members. The problem is, with it being located on the edge of your network, it is subject to attack. So, as a partner to this weekend, just before this gets posted, I will be writing up an article and I'll be posting it on my blog and I will give it to Sean to put in the notes on how to set up and deploy a PFSense firewall. It is a wonderfully useful tool and it actually allows you to do a lot of things that naturally we should be doing. It's just no one really does it. For example, you can actually segment your home network so that when visitors are coming and using your guest Wi-Fi, you can have them completely isolated from all of your stuff. So when your sister-in-law's friend comes over for a barbecue, you can hand out the Wi-Fi password to the guest network that you've set up and not worry about them getting into the rest of your network. Most people don't have to care about that, but in the grand scheme of things, it's something that we should all actually be doing because, as I said, this is going to get worse and it's going to get really bad and it's going to get really ugly. The Windows vulnerability that came out this week, you do need to go and apply the updates. Seriously, go apply and run Windows Update. To give you a perspective of how bad it is, we were told at work, and I'm not going to mention my place of employment, some of you know where it is, we were given 24 hours to apply the updates. If we had not applied the updates within 24 hours, they were going to turn off the network ports for our computers. This is how serious and easily exploitable this bug is. Go update your stuff. Start looking at getting a PFSense firewall. Basically, it's a matter of getting a small stripped-down computer, and I will put all the links up on my blog on exactly what to get. So, please, I know it's a little bit of work. If you have a tech friend, buy him a beer, have him come over. he'll probably be more than willing to help. With that, have a great weekend.
Barron still blogs at the-minuteman.org.
Florida just expanded their self-defense immunity hearing. Why is this important? If you saw what happened to a guy in Abilene, Texas, you would know why Miguel is totally in favor of this new law.
Hello, and welcome once again to the Mental Flea Market. This is Miguel, and today I want to address on a new law in Florida, the expansion of self-defense immunity. Warning, there will be ranting and possibly a bad word or two. You have probably heard about this law in the media under the moniker of the expansion of stand your ground. And usually they are mucking up the porridge on purpose since the law has nothing to do with it. But why screw up the narrative, right? Florida has immunity from prosecution, which means that if you claim innocence on a self-defense shooting, it is up to you to present the evidence and prove it in a pretrial hearing. You need to go to a judge in a pretrial hearing that you request and present the evidence. You are basically considered guilty until proven innocent. In a perfect Walgreens world, where prosecutors and judges were after justice and not engrossing their stats for re-election, an immunity from prosecution hearing would be rather fast. If you were truly defending yourself, the district attorney would agree and say that to the judge. Only if the shooter was an criminal is when the DA would come down on force and prove that he's undoing, Unfortunately, we have seen clear cases of prosecutorial misconduct which eventually forced the Florida legislature to fix the law. And it goes like this. In a criminal prosecution, once a prima facie claim of self-defense immunity from criminal prosecution has been raised by the defendant at a pretrial immunity hearing, the burden of proof by clear and convincing evidence is on the party seeking to overcome the immunity from criminal prosecution provided in the subsection 1. Warning, 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 I am not a lawyer, so whatever I say it legally, it's gotta be taken with several pounds of salt. Now, believe it or not, the concept of a person innocent until proven guilty in a case of self-defense is brand spanking new. Prior to this law, Florida followed the rest of the country doing what is called the affirmative defense. It basically says, yes, I screwed up, there is a reason why. And then you were supposed to present conclusive evidence to demonstrate you were innocent of the charges. If you did that, then your charge of murder or manslaughter gets to be reclassified justifiable homicide, or at least you are found not guilty. The expansion of self-defense immunity now places that burden of presenting evidence of wrongdoing on the prosecutor instead of the defendant having to prove his innocence. Mind you, not evidence of guilt beyond reasonable doubt, but enough to make the judge go, well, maybe we should keep this one in the net. Now, the prosecutor doesn't present that, the judge can go, dear prosecutor, just because the defendant looked at you with a stinky eye is no reason to press charges. He's free to go. Sounds silly? Believe me, crap has been done for less than that. Of course, this has not gone well among the Florida prosecutors. Gun control activities are going off the rails, and the media that for some reason has forgotten to mention that the Florida Public Defender's Office has supported this bill since day one. Their contention is that now every gangbanger and mass killer will go free because they can plead for immunity hearing and automatically they will be set free. It is funny because it was the same excuse they waived when Stand Your Ground and the original immunity of prosecution became law. And nothing like that has happened. Now, why I support this bill and why I wish it spreads like wildfire across the nation? Because cases like this one I'm about to tell you. Please pay attention to the dates. Abilene, Texas. I know, Texas, not Florida. Abilene, Texas, June 12, 2017. Judge Thomas Wheeler of the 350th District Court signed an order Monday dismissing a murder charge against an Abilene man accused of fatally shooting his roommate in April 2015. Dan Joyner, a Taylor County Assistant District Attorney, filed a motion on Monday because of a lack of evidence that the killing was done with malice. Brian Andrew Fogiel, 26, claimed from the time he called 911 in April of 2015 that he shot his roommate Rafael Oladapo Oloyede in self-defense, said Taylor County District Attorney James Hicks. On the call, he said Fogiel says he was defending himself from being attacked with a beer bottle. Okay, so far so good. What's next? You're gonna love this. We came across some information that corroborates his claim of self-defense, Joyner said. Hicks says during witness preparation that Joyner discovered one of the first police officers on the scene found Oloyede had a beer bottle in his hand turned upside down like a weapon. The beer bottle was found right by the gun. Through the investigation, we were under the impression that Mr. Fogel has just shot without reason his roommate, Hicks said. Wait, what? Okay, hold on. With this new evidence, he said, he cannot proceed with prosecuting Fogel. Ethically speaking, you can proceed to trial in a situation where all the evidence points to the fact that the accused used self-defense, and we have no evidence to disprove that because that is our burden to prove. Ladies and gentlemen, this case was not just being investigated. A trial date had been set to begin nailing Fogel with a long prison term. You would think that if a district attorney is okay with going to trial, he has done his due diligence, has all evidence and testimony checked and ready. But no, just before the trial was to start, was the only time that somebody in the DA's office said, you know, Mildred, why don't you go get me the box of the Fogel case so I can check it out? I do believe the trial is coming in the next couple of weeks, and we need to get ready. Oh crap, there might be evidence there that proves the guy is innocent after all. And they tout themselves as ethical because they let the guy go? You know, that pisses me off. Was it ethical not to do their job, not to collect and revise the evidence and testimony on time? Was it ethical to charge an innocent man with murder and even set trial dates that you then asked to be delayed? You basically f***ed up this young man's reputation and froze his life for 2 years because you could. And somehow we have to admire your pimple-sized fake ethics. Are we supposed to accept you're saying, oops, my bad, in cheap legalese? No. The American Bar Association, in its general standard for prosecutors, states, the duty of the prosecutor is to seek justice, not merely to convict. Obviously, this guy failed to do so, and we have seen the same happening with other self-defense cases. And ladies and gents, this is why I support the expansion of self-defense immunity across the United States. Okay, rant's off. As usual, be safe. Comments can be directed to the contact page at gunblogvarietycast.com. Other than that, as usual, people, have a good one. See you next time.
Get more Miguel daily at gunfreezone.net.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio Podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.
In this week's main topic, we have special guest Luke Apps of the Triangle Tactical Podcast. Luke tells us what he thinks is the biggest problem with advancing gun rights. Lucas Apps is the host of Triangle Tactical Podcast, which is competitive shooting, mostly. Welcome to the show, Luke.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Last week you got a bit off the general competitive shooting topic and delved into a subject that could have been, well, just a little bit controversial. The biggest problem with advancing gun rights. So, what is the biggest problem with advancing gun rights? Is it politicians?
Nope.
Anti-gunners?
Nope.
Or that vast middle ground of people who just don't care?
No, it's not them either. It's us.
What do you mean it's us?
It's gun owners. It's gun owners in general. We are the problem with advancing gun rights. You know, I was actually really surprised. I did this episode and I was like, when I pushed publish in my WordPress or whatever it was, like I was just like sitting there waiting. When are the emails going to start? Because I knew like the haterade was coming for it. And you know what? Honestly, it didn't. Like I got a ton of people saying like, no, dude, you're right. And so here's my thing. The biggest issue impacting gun owners and the reason we can't get a lot of the gun rights and stuff back that we've lost and the reason we can't get a lot of these laws passed that we want to get passed is because we're not doing a good job engaging that vast middle ground. It really drives me nuts when I see this. Like there was a time long ago and I was at work and I used to do a security type job. This guy happened to be walking through the building where I worked and he had a gun, open carry. And I just I came out and said, hey man, is that a Glock 19? Oh dude, this is my right. You know, open carry is legal in this state, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, bro, like, I get it. I was just asking if it was a Glock 19. And like the dude just like jumped down my throat about my rights. And it turned me off. And I'm like, as pro gun as they come. And I was just like, dude, You know, like it just, that reaction just wasn't great. And so what I found, Sean, is I've had a long series of blog posts on my website that I've been doing for several years now called being out as a gun guy. Cause I'm out. Like I don't hide it. I don't not talk about it. Like if I go and shoot a match one weekend, like when I get to work, like, dude, hey, check out this video. Man, I shot a master classifier last weekend. Here's the Instagram video of it. You know, showing it to people because I'm excited about it. And it's something that I like to do. And so I talk about it. The trouble is that a lot of people who shoot guns a lot, they don't like to talk about it. And it really drives me nuts. And I found it very strange as being this guy who's out as a shooter, out as a gun guy, whatever you want to call it, that nobody talks about it. And so like I'm part of a professional group, a group of like local entrepreneurs and stuff. It was so strange to me. I went to the first group there and I introduced myself. Hey, I'm Lucas and I talk about competitive handgun shooting. I was kind of not sure how people were going to take it when I went to the first meeting. And everybody was cool, whatever. And since then, I've had one person from the group kind of come out and say some weird things about shooting to me. It kind of somewhat negative, but like, I don't care about that guy. Half of the other regulars in this group, half of them, Sean, have come up to me after meetings and said, hey, you know, man, my son's a Marine and I've got like a couple of Glocks and a Smith & Wesson, but I'm scared of them. Like, I don't know how to use them. What do I do? Who should I go to? Bro, I'm your guy, right? I get people, hey, you know, man, I work kind of in a bad area and I got to walk through an even worse area to get there. And I kind of feel like I need to get my carry permit. Who should I go talk to? I'm your guy. And it's funny, like literally half of the people who are the regulars in this group have come up to me after meetings now because they kind of have my respect or they respect me or something, I guess. And they see me as just kind of a normal dude. And I think because they see me as being somewhat normal, they can know that I'm not like this crazy wacko that sometimes gets stereotyped as gun owners.
So it sounds to me like there's two groups of people that are the problem. There's the ones who never talk about it, so nobody knows that they're normal people with guns. And the other group is the people who are running around, tactical, drop leg, open carry, my rights, my rights.
Like, I don't even think the tactical and the open carry is the problem. I think the real problem is the my rights. And listen, I love my rights. I'm a big supporter of like all the rights. Like I'm the crazy libertarian podcaster, right? You do you, man. I don't care. I'm not here to judge you. But if we're playing the game of public opinion, and we, you know, I hear this from the open carry crowd a lot, that you know, I'm open and carrying to educate the public. I hear that all the time. But if you're doing it with like your camo pants on, bloused into your boots, wearing a Hillary for Prison t-shirt, you're not educating the public. Like you're turning people off right off the bat. And listen, I'm not here to judge your fashion sense because I still wear like the cargo shorts, which are apparently out of fashion, and I just don't care. But if you're not dressed in a somewhat normal way, people aren't going to see you as a normal person. That's a thing. I think, you know, when we get into this with like the trying to convince the public that guns aren't weird, and you're dressed in a way that's politicizing the conversation right off the bat, you're turning half the people off right off the bat. And I think more than half the people out there are fence sitters. Like I really don't believe that there's this vast majority of people who are anti-gun. I don't believe it. I think there's a very loud minority of people who are anti-gun. And I think the vast majority of people, left, right, center, are just kind of on the fence because they don't really know about them. Grandpa might have had a gun. Dad might have had a gun in the closet that they never went shooting with or whatever. But a lot of people are just kind of on the fence about it. They might play Call of Duty or whatever the cool new video. I've been out of the video game thing for a long time. But they might play video games that have guns and stuff, but they've never really been out around real ones since they don't know what to think. They hear things on the news. They may have a slightly negative slant because of things they've heard on the news, but they don't really know what to think. And so here's kind of my rules. Make things normal in conversation. Don't dress weird. Don't politicize things right off the bat. So when somebody comes up to me and says, hey, Lucas, you know, what are your hobbies, man? I'm getting to know somebody or whatever. Like I lead right off the bat every single time with, I'm a competitive handgun shooter. And if they ask me more, I tell them that I'm A-class ranked in an international organization, blah, 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 blah. A-class. Sounds impressive, right? It's really the middle of the road of the classification system in my game, but it sounds good. And then I talk about how it's an international organization and we have a world shoot coming up in France this year. Well, the world shoot, I mean, that sounds impressive, right? In France, like Europeans are really anti-gun, so this guy must be pretty normal if they can do what he does in France. There's nothing political about it. There's nothing divisive about it. And it intrigues people and they ask more questions and stuff. So the other thing here that I have is, like, I don't waste my time on people who aren't coming into a conversation legitimately. Like if somebody's like, oh, well, Lucas, what do you think about this? You know, well, right now in North Carolina, we're trying to pass a constitutional carry bill. oh, Lucas, what do you think about just any Tom, Dick, or Harry being able to carry a gun without a permit? Just the way they ask that question makes me think that they've already made up their mind, right? Like they've already got an idea of what they think about it. And so I'm probably not going to waste my time having a conversation with that person because they've made up their mind. I've made up my mind. We don't have any middle ground. And so why would I waste my time? I'm not going to convince them. They're not going to convince me otherwise in this conversation. We're just going to wind up mad at each other. So that would be a conversation I would just bow out of. Like, whatever, man, I got nothing for you. But when you're the normal person, when you're the guy or gal or whoever, who's out there and you're just normal. Like, I just like to shoot stuff. I like to shoot fast. I'm a competitive shooter, whatever. What I've found is people start to come to you with legitimate questions. Hey, man, what do you think about this bill that's coming up? This concealed carry thing. Well, guess what? There's 13 other states that you don't need a concealed carry permit to carry. And we haven't seen any like crazy jumps in murders or violent crime rate or anything. So I think that it's a good thing. Oh, well, Lucas is a pretty normal guy. That seems like a pretty normal opinion based on fact. And so you can start to change someone's opinion. I mean, have you seen any of that, Sean?
I found that you're right. If you get straight into people's faces and start quoting statistics and facts and you give them like the grand unified field theory of why gun rights are cool and you're wrong, they just get mad. It just doesn't make them happy. It doesn't really advance you any. Yeah, that's the thing too, is when I have a conversation with somebody, I can try to stay very calm, very collected. And, if somebody's being very honest with me in asking me legitimate questions, don't politicize it. If somebody's asking me about this and they're coming to the conversation with whole cloth, right? They're not being the snippy whatever. They're just being normal and asking me a question because they think I'm normal. Don't politicize it. So don't in that conversation tell them that like Hillary should be in prison and Obama's a Muslim who should have never been elected because he was born in Kenya and my rights, because they're not going to be interested in what you have to say, right? You're being divisive right off the bat. Whether or not you think those things or not, I don't care. Just be normal. Don't politicize it. Also, don't throw like a billion statistics at people right off the bat. Where somebody's, asking you an honest question and you're just like, well, 90% of this and 80% of that, blah, 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 blah. All they're going to see you as is like the dude who like rattled my ear off for 30 minutes with statistics and numbers, trying to convince me right there. And like, I'm not sure what to think, but it doesn't work, right? You got to play this game of public opinion when you're trying to convince people. And it's the long game. It's not a short game. So that's how you got to play it. Okay. So that takes care of those people who, just want to bury you in facts and details and my rights. But what about those who have guns, who keep it kind of on the down low? How can they break out a little more? So this is what I see a lot is people, they have guns. A lot of folks have guns. A lot of folks like guns. But it's the strangest thing is that when people get in public, they don't like to talk about it. And I think people are maybe afraid of a negative reaction or something. But I'll tell you, Sean, very rarely do I ever get a negative reaction from people. There's one person I probably see this person once a month or so, who will give me a negative thing every now and again. But like I said, I don't care about that person and I don't really care about their opinion. But other than that, like I interact with tons of people all the time and I hardly ever get anything negative. I mean, it's really strange that gun owners seem to be so afraid of talking about things. And listen, I live in a big city. I work in Raleigh, North Carolina. Like there's people of all walks of life from all over the world that I talk to. And if you're just normal, people just kind of act like it's normal. I'm out in public, I'm talking to people, and most of the time people think that looks really cool. And I can whip out Instagram and show them a video or something. So I think what we really need to do is just normalize it, right? So if you're on Facebook and you take your daughter shooting, man, put a picture up there. People love that stuff. And it's very normal. If you got a little girl dressed in pink with pigtails shooting a .22, like that doesn't look terrible to me. So Julie Golub did a video last week, and I think Sean's going to link to it in the show notes. But one of the things she talked about was at like competitive shooting ranges in order to grow the shooting sports, they need to have Wi-Fi and stuff so people can post their range selfies. But I say take a picture at the range of your range selfie. And then when you get home, if you don't have Wi-Fi, put it up on Facebook, tweet it out, put it on Instagram. Let all your friends see what you do and that you're smiling and like the people around you are normal. That's how you make things normal, is just by kind of being normal. And if you're going to educate the public on something, just do it by being normal. That's my big lesson here, Sean. It's just kind of go with the flow. Don't try to be all up in people's faces about my rights and all that, because for some reason, there's something about that argument that just shuts people down. And it's kind of sad to me that it does, because I think our rights are important. But for some reason, in conversations with the general public, it just tends to shut people down. So once we get them on our side, though, and they're like, oh, I have a gun now and I'm going to go shooting, and then they're going to be open to that my rights argument because now it's their rights too.
Sure, yeah. Even since I was a small child, I've always cared about my rights and my freedom. I've always been quite independent, I think. But once I became a competitive shooter and I started spending like every weekend on the range shooting, and I was shooting guns that are high capacity guns, with these high capacity magazines that are so frightening. And I started to really care a lot more about these bans that were being proposed and stuff, because it's like, that's how I spend every weekend, is shooting these things competitively. And it's not immoral. It's not wrong. And it just really started to bother me like way more than it did when I was just like a concealed carrier. Cause I would be a concealed carrier and I would weigh in my head, I'd be like, okay, like, my gun only carries 7 rounds, so I wouldn't really be affected by that, and you could kind of weigh it in your head a little bit. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but you could kind of at least weigh it and say, I wouldn't be affected by that or whatever. As a competitor, like my friends shoot guns that hold, handguns that hold 24 rounds. I shoot a gun that can hold 17 rounds. A lot of the 3-gunners shoot guns that hold 40 some rounds. And it's like, okay, like this is how I spend my time. I have so much time invested in money, invested in practice and bullets and, a reloading press and all this stuff. And just time, all my whole weekends are competitive shooting. And now they want to take that away from me? That ain't happening. And so I'm a big fan. I think the shooting sports are a key to getting us, securing our gun rights for the future.
So if there was one thing that you could say to shooters, to gun owners everywhere, what would it be?
Just be normal. Just be a normal, go with the flow person. Shooting isn't immoral. It isn't wrong. So stop hiding it. There's no reason to live in the shadows like we're criminals for being gun owners. It's a right. I believe it was a right given to us by our Creator and guaranteed by the Constitution. It's not immoral. It's not wrong. So talk about it. Show it. Let your gun owner flag fly, man.
All right, Luke. It was good to talk with you. I'll see you again soon.
You can hear more from Luke at triangletactical.net or subscribe to the Triangle Tactical podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, and TuneIn. Tiffany is still recovering from her hip surgery and will return soon.
And now it's time for Blue Collar Prepping with that bratty kid sister of the gun blogosphere, Erin Paulette.
Come on, every pony! It's time for Blue Collar Prepping with Erin Paulette!
This week is the 1-year anniversary of the Pulse Massacre. Many people were traumatized by this. Not just those who were injured, but also the friends and family of the victims. A loved one being injured or killed is itself a form of victimization. Anger, grief, survivor's guilt, post-traumatic stress disorder. All of these are the brain's way of trying to cope with the loss of something cherished, be it a person or a body part or a sense of self. Any or all of these can be taken away through accident or violence. Last year, I did a series of segments on Lawrence Gonzalez's books Deep Survival and Everyday Survival. This year, I'm going to do a series on his book Surviving Survival, which deals with what happens to people after they've made it through their ordeal, being lost at sea, the death of a child, having a spouse try to murder them, and the difficulties they face as they try to integrate the new person they needed to become in order to survive into their old life. Flashbacks are very common with people who have PTSD. This is due to what's known as a conditioned response, and it's exactly the same thing as when Pavlov trained his dogs to salivate at the sound of a bell. In neurobiology, when 2 nerve cells fire at the same time, even if by accident, they will fire together in the future. The phrase is fire together, wire together. They become linked into what is known as a cell assembly, and so when one fires, they all fire. And if they are assembled during a moment of high emotion, then it becomes difficult to keep them from firing, to effectively unwire them, even if the things which are linked are completely separate. This is how and why flashbacks occur. If you hear a particular sound or smell a specific scent when something traumatic happens, the event will become paired with that sound or smell in your mind. So if you were listening to a particular song on the radio right before you were injured in an automobile accident, your brain will associate that song with pain and fear and auto accidents, and listening to it will cause a fear or pain response. It is this association which explains why we become attached to people. Their presence causes nerve cells to fire, and at the same time the cells for us being happy because of something they do or say also fire, and so we associate their presence with that emotional state. The longer we are around them, the more those cells fire and the stronger the response is. There are also nerves in our brain, which are called seeking pathways, and they allow us to acquire what we need to survive. If we are thirsty, a seeking pathway helps us find water. If we are tired, a seeking pathway encourages us to find a safe place to sleep, and so on. But if you are thirsty and cannot drink, if you are tired and cannot sleep, your seeking pathways cannot complete their task, and this results in frustration, which is another form of anxiety. It's one thing to just be hungry or thirsty, especially if you know, even subconsciously, that you can easily remedy the situation. It's another to know that you are unable to fix it because the human mind has trouble soothing a frustrated pathway. If left unchecked, this anxiety activates another form of path, the rage pathway, which is an essential survival mechanism among mammals. It's why your initial desire is to lash out when you're hurt, because instinct tells us that whatever is hurting us is a predator and we have to kill it before it kills us. And so, if your brain is telling you that you need something and you cannot have it, that anxiety registers as fear and your body believes it's being attacked and so attacks back. Suddenly, toddler temper tantrums make a lot more sense, now don't they? When you want something that was taken from you, be it a loved one, a limb, that sense of innocence or feeling of not having been violated that you had before you were attacked, and you cannot get at it, the rage pathway activates. Sometimes it's violent and destructive, sometimes it's focused inward and manifests as grief, but in all cases, the underpinning desire is the same. Something bad is happening to me, and I don't want it to happen. Go away, bad thing. The human brain is essentially dominated by just these two systems, the seeking and the rage pathways. We are either trying to draw something towards us, even if it's something abstract like the pleasure of a job well done, or we are trying to push things away from us. What's interesting about this, and relevant to people who are angry, grieving, or suffering from flashbacks, is that these two systems cannot activate at the same time. If you want to destroy, you cannot create. And if you are creating, you have no desire to destroy. Just be aware of how quickly one can shift to the other. But it's this rapid shift that can actually be of benefit to people suffering from loss, because it enables them to overwrite feelings of rage, grief, and anxiety by engaging the seeking pathway. A simple, repetitive, constructive activity, like knitting, or weeding the garden, or physical exercise like running, or hunting, or fishing, or shooting, all of these activate the seeking pathway and deactivate the rage pathway. Perhaps this is because humans are predators. If we are hungry, we need to eat, and so our focus on getting the meal precludes our fear of being eaten by something larger. And perhaps this is how humans became tool users. The seeking pathway rewards our brain with dopamine when we accomplish something, like acquiring food. And so the act of creating tools similarly engaged our seeking pathways and rewarded our actions with dopamine. Now, if you take nothing else from this segment today, take this. If you are angry, if you are grieving, if you are anxious, then engage in a simple, repetitive task that rewards you for completing it. You will find that not only will it soothe the pain you feel, but you will also have something to show for your efforts.
Weird is coming at us with one final episode from the Moms Demand Action protest during the NRA annual meeting in Atlanta. In
This week in Anti-Gun Nuttery.
So here's the last few clips I have of the Moms Demand Action counter-protest of the NRA annual meeting in Atlanta. This is the longest speech given that day, and it was only 9 minutes long. It was Reverend Raphael Warnock, the pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, the very church where Reverend Martin Luther King both attended and preached.
Hats off to these moms who suffered so much pain and so much violence, and somehow they have transformed their pain into power.
That power only got a few hundred people with several months' notice, and a whole bunch of crushing political defeats.
Don't allow anyone to frame this argument as an argument between those who are for the Second Amendment and those who are against the Second Amendment. Nobody here is against the right to bear arms.
So this is a pastor. What does the Bible say about giving false witness, Reverend? You just spoke on the same stage as Shannon Watts, and the stage was paid for by Michael Bloomberg. These people are against the Second Amendment, and this is why this argument needs to be framed that way. They can argue against hunting. They can argue against collecting and sport shooting. They can't argue against the Second Amendment and personal defense.
A few years ago, there were those in the gun lobby who felt that it was a good idea for us to be able to have guns in churches.
Well, the Second Amendment applies everywhere, just like the First Amendment allows you to pray and worship everywhere.
Now we have to place placards in front of our houses of worship saying no guns allowed. That's an insult. We should not even have to do this. This was not on our agenda. It was on somebody else's agenda.
No, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. Just like how the state of Georgia is no longer allowed to place placards on buildings that say no blacks allowed. I have the right to defend myself no matter how backwards your view of the Second Amendment is. But why would I need a gun in a church?
Dr. King's mother, Alberta Williams King, Mama King we called her, the church organist, was also a victim of gun violence in our sanctuary.
Except that Alberta King was murdered in 1974, when weapons were prohibited in houses of worship, and concealed carry was May issue, and for blacks, like Mama King and her killer, that might as well have been no issue. So the Reverend can hardly blame this death on lack of regulation. But here he is, calling for more regulation.
That was before you could have all of these guns and all of these clips, and all of these automatic clips. It's worse now.
These are the gun experts who should be dictating firearms policy. Also, how is it worse? Has there been a mass shooting in a church since the carry ban was lifted? How is the violent crime trending right now? Now he relates about his experience going to the Capitol building to advocate against civil rights in Georgia.
We had to go into the Capitol. And in order to go to the Capitol, guess what we had to do? We had to go through metal detectors. I had to take out my cell phone and my keys and put them in a basket. I had to be wand. I had to subject myself to a wand in order to go through the Capitol. Why? Because guns are not allowed in the Capitol. They're not. If guns are not good, so we have to send a message to our legislators. If you don't want guns in your place of work, we don't want guns in our place of work. What's good for you is good for all of us.
It's pretty foolish. We talked about this back in episode 114. I pointed out that 14 state capitals had no restrictions on carry in the Capitol buildings, with no issue. The solution is reasonable policy, not more unreasonable policies.
I'm telling you folks, this is a dangerous mix. This is a dangerous cocktail of racism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, and they're saying that the best thing we can do is arm ourselves against one another. I've got news for you. That is not how we make America great.
He's right. Violence is not the way to make America great. But nonviolence is no match when confronted with true violence. If you can't defend your life, you are at the mercy of the worst elements of society.
A lot can happen in this country if moms will stand together. The rest of us have got to stand, but I've got a feeling if moms will lead the way, that there's no way you can stop mamas who are concerned about their children. We need moms and grandmamas to stand up, and we'll stand up with you.
Well, except he's discounting the moms who know that when seconds count, the police are minutes away. Certainly when looking at the scorecard of political victories for Michael Bloomberg, as well as the attendance numbers in Atlanta, the armed mom side is winning. I'll close with one final cut of Representative John Lewis.
And you know, they're talking about punishing some of us for sitting down on the floor. But more than 180 members on the Democratic side were prepared to sit in. We're prepared to be arrested and go to jail.
I am very comfortable with these people who wish to violate our civil rights and the law of the land going to jail. Not that I expect them to actually get arrested, because this statement, like all the other statements given that day, were all bad faith arguments.
In addition to appearing here, Weird is a regular host on The Squirrel Report and blogs at weirdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com.
Plug of the week. Instead of a plug of the week, we're going to do a call to action. Get in touch with us. Aaron, what did you think of last week's episode where we talked to Violet directly and we kind of reacted to the email that we got in on her behalf?
Well, yeah, I thought it was cute, and I really enjoy themed episodes. I remember, I think it was in the first year of the show, where you had each of us do a segment based on a segment of dialogue from an episode of CSI, and I really like that. Partially because, okay, this is a little tiny soapbox I'm stepping on. It seems like the other contributors really have an easy time of it. I mean, the antis are constantly making fools of themselves, so Weird has a plethora to choose from.
Jefe, what is a plethora?
Why, Guapo?
Well, you told me I have a plethora, and I just would like to know if you know what a plethora is. I would not like to think that a person would tell someone he has a plethora and find out that that person has no idea what it means to have a plethora.
Barron, the tech environment is constantly changing. There's constantly new threats and new bad ideas. Your segment, criminals are always committing crimes and being dumb. But I have to dig for quality prepping stuff. And there are days where I just can't think of it. And either I do a last minute, retrieval from my rectum, or maybe I just go, I can't do it today, Sean. And so if I have an assignment, or at the very least an idea, I don't have to think of it from whole cloth. I can go, okay, well, this is the flavor of the week. How can I turn this to prepping? And it really makes my life easier. So yes, I do like these theme assignments.
And you could also answer questions if anybody bothered to send you a question, right?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, that was one of the segments I did when your wife, the wife, contacted me about setting up not exactly a get-home bag, but just an emergency kit for her car. And we had a very nice email exchange over about a month, and that got turned into a segment.
Right, and it's a great little kit she has underneath the seat of the truck. We've actually used parts out of it a couple times, so it was a great little kit.
Great.
So contact us. Send us emails. Send us something from the contact page. If you know us directly, you know our email addresses, send the email directly. But if you don't, use the contact page. We also have a Facebook page. Interact with us on the Facebook page. When you listen to an episode, find the episode on our Facebook page and leave us a comment. I really like it when we get those comments from people that say, oh, I like the episode, or, oh, well, I have this question. So talk with us, interact with us, because when we have that interaction, that gives us something that we can work with for next week. Other things that you can do is you can plan to go to events with us. Most likely, we're going to make NRA annual meeting next year because we had so much fun this year. And it looks like we're going to be both going to Gun Rights Policy Conference in, which one is in which? One's in Houston, one's in Dallas, right?
GRPC is in Dallas.
You should totally come and see us there. And finally, how can you help the podcast out besides interacting with us and giving us interesting things to talk about? You can donate or subscribe to the podcast. We have something in every episode saying, hey, go to the right sidebar, donate or subscribe. That money really helps. We use that money to pay every month's service costs. It costs us like $20 a month just to host the podcast. So the money that we get from that, and it's not a huge amount, we put it to making this podcast a little bit better. So contact us, go on our Facebook page, go to events with us. Heck, if you're holding a shooting class, invite us. Donate and subscribe to the podcast. Aaron needs subjects. Tell Aaron what you want to hear about. If you have a prepping question, get in touch with Aaron.
Because if there's one thing I love more than talking, it's talking to other people about a subject I'm passionate about. Oh, you want to know what I think? Oh, lovely. Yes. Sit down, get comfortable. I'm going to build you a clock.
Yes. My wife jokes about that. I'm not only going to build you a clock, right? I'm going to tell you how to build a clock, but I'm going to tell you why specifically we're going to build it like a Swiss clock and not like a German clock. So yeah, put a quarter in, wind Erin up, and she will tell you a great story about how you can do this, this, and this to prep for this particular problem. So get in touch with us. Get on our Facebook page. Go to events with us. Donate and subscribe to the podcast. That's what I want you to do this week.
Operators are standing by.
Well, that's our show for the week. Remember that GunBlog VarietyCast Radio is a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.
Find the show notes at gunblogvarietycast.com/episode 148.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the GunBlog VarietyCast. Music courtesy of Rob Allen at blog.roballen.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and Google Play Music. This podcast is made possible by the Firearms Policy Coalition and by contributions from listeners like you.
In This Week in Anti-Gun Nuttery.
Oh, train. Let's let that go by.
Woo woo!
And there goes the train. And there's Sean Coffin smoking his palm walls.
I get him at Jackie's Packy.
Jackie's Packy. For your ciggies and beers.
Out on Route 30.
Right next to the old gas station that was burned down by black kids. You gotta love the overt Boston racism. What? They were black kids and they burned it down.
Is the train done yet?
The train's been done.
Okay.
The question is, are we done?
Hey, I brought you some cigarettes and beer from Jackie's Packy on Route 34.
This is a URS production.